Okay. In this video, we're going to compare between inlays, onlays, and overlays. Inlays, we said it's intracoronal, and it's usually, it could be a class 1 or a class 2 lesion. I could include a box on the side. It comes into place without including the cusp tips. Okay. Once I include the cusp tips, I could not end my inlay on the cusp tip because this is an area of stress. Okay. I need to come over the cusp. If my inlay covers that cusp tip, it becomes an onlay. And how much should I prepare for structural durability?
2 millimeters.
At least, depending on the material. Good answer. If the material is metal,
1.5.
1 millimeter on the functional.
1 or 1.5 on the functional, 1 on the non-functional. If it is ceramic, 2 functional. And if it's monolithic, I could go for less.
Yes.
Okay, depending on the structure. Okay, if I cross over the cusp tip and go to the dentine on the buccal or the lingual, depending on which side, say this is the buccal. If I cross over the cusp tip of the dentine now, because I prepared the enamel is gone, and I come down, so I have this shape, the dome shape. This is where they call it overlay. Some of the people, some of the prosthodontists call it an overlay because it crossed over the cusp tip and come to the buccal or lingual surface.
An onlay.
Onlay? Okay. Suppose this, I'm going to do an onlay here. I'm going to remove the enamel, but I don't have to cross over. I'm not going to do the overlap. I simply can end my cavity like this, following the enamel prisms. So now it's covering the cusp tip. I have the enough thickness, but I'm not going over. Okay? These, they call it an onlay. So this is just the difference. Some books, they call everything, either it's crossing or not crossing, they call it all onlay. So just because you might pass over this terminology, but you need to know it, it's crossing over.
Onlay بعمل finish line.
Yes, there is a finish line on the buccal, but definitely it's in the upper half of the tooth
Onlay
of the buccal.
مش شرط أعمل finish line.
This is the finish line. It is, but the finish line is flush with the cavity. It's not over and crossing over to the buccal surface. So on the buccal, you only see the cusp tip thickness only. You don't see anything here. But in the overlays, or let's say that's an onlay that has a crossover design, it crosses over here. They say now with the new material, new bonds, you don't need to cross over. This is traumatic for the tooth. Leave it as it is. This is enough for it. But take into account, onlays are not 3/4 crowns. So
Yeah.
these are not crowns. Why? Because
No,
it has an intracoronal part of it. Onlays have an intracoronal component of it. But also it doesn't go into the pulp cavity. Suppose this was endodontically treated. Once it goes into the pulp cavity, the same restorative material goes in, it becomes an endocrown. And an endocrown has on its occlusal surface the same designs we have here, either flush or crossing over the cusp. We have these two designs for the margins.
أنا حاطط Endocrown بس overlay.
Most of the endocrowns use the overlay design. Most of them. Why? Because you need resistance forming. Sometimes the pulp chamber wall is shallow. Sometimes the crown length. This usually endocrowns are done for patients that have dirt or are old. So we have lost already some of the enamel. We have already lost some of the dentine, and the patient had over-erupted tooth. We don't have interocclusal space. So we place the endocrown inside the pulp chamber, but still what's remaining is very short. It will not retain it.
Yeah.
So where am I going to get my retention from overlapping into the overlay design? Okay, that's why in endocrowns we usually use this design. But what is the difference between onlay and endocrown? We're not going into the pulp chamber. We're not reaching the pulp chamber. Okay, so this is our task today.
والonlay كسب coverage.
We're going to do on one side, we're going to do the onlay. You're going to suppose you have a class 1 cavity. We're going to do different teeth. One of the teeth we're going to do this design, and the other tooth we're going to do this design. And an inlay we're going to use, and for the inlay I'm going to let you make an MOD cavity.
Inlay.
Inlay, for the inlay, an MOD cavity. Okay, for the onlay, I'm going to just go for class 1 cavity, but different designs on the lingual cusp other than the
دكتورة
buccal.
احنا كيف بنسميها انلي اذا بنوصل للكستب صح؟ انت
ما
حكيتي.
نوصل كسب.
ما حنوصل cusp.
MOD.
It's a class
MOD.
MOD. It's over the marginal ridge, not over the cusp.
هلا أنا
And by the way, there are some inlays that go over the buccal groove or palatal groove. Suppose it's the upper 6. Maybe the groove. Suppose this is the 6. Just good question. Okay, just let me just. Okay, this is the upper 6.
الدكتور مكتوب لك هلا الانلاي بالام او دي مكتوب انه بس اذا كانت مينيمال، اذا كانت بيج ام او دي you have to cover the cusps.
Yes.
You have to
Here,
make-
these are the indications, contraindications. I'm not going to go
okay.
into them. This is your task.
Ah.
Okay, when do we cover cusp? When we don't cover cusp, these are the indications, contraindications. Okay, your task. I'm not going to go over that. But you have a good question. How do I call it an inlay if I'm crossing over to this surface? I told you an inlay, we're going to do it in MOD. Okay, suppose the cavity was like this. This is an MOD. When we go over marginal ridges, the structural strength of the tooth is still not it's not in risk, the structural durability of the tooth, as if I cross over a cusp tip. So when I cross to the the mesial or distal, it's okay in inlays and onlays. And even sometimes we have the crossover to the palatal, for example. Suppose this was a 6, an upper 6, and I have a palatal lesion. I could cross over with my design. It's a cavity.
Yeah.
I could cross over and come here because always I have a path of insertion.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have a path of insertion. You don't have any undercuts in the surfaces. I should see all of the walls from one view from the occlusal. Okay, I could in some teeth I could cross over to the lingual if it was a lower, for example, and it has caries on the lingual groove, but I don't cross over the cusp. So the structural durability is better when the cusp is there. So when do we have intracoronal anyway? We have 2/3 of the cusp there to support us, and we have the dentine there. Okay, once I have less than 1/2 of the cusp, I will think about something else. Okay, and this is your task, so I'm not going to go into the indications and indications. It's part of the task that I explained to you. Okay, any other question?